Coming up on the next edition of Power and Politics, Super Tuesday just a few days away, what we should expect as the race for the White House comes into focus. And back home, a rash of measles comes with calls to fire the state's top doctor. Hello and welcome to another edition of Power and Politics. I'm your host, Frank Cipolla. Power and Politics is a weekly, unbiased look at the top stories affecting the state, with a special emphasis on the psychology behind the decisions and issues that affect our lives. We want to take a moment to say hello to our many viewers watching, as they do every week, on stations throughout the state, including stations in Miami, Tampa, Pensacola, Tallahassee, and elsewhere. I am joined today, as I am every week, by my co-host, Emmy Award-winning political psychologist, Dr. Bart Rossi. Doctor, welcome.
Great to be here again.
All right, we are just a few days away from Super Tuesday. Voters in 16 states and 1 U.S. territory are going to the polls, with both President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump seemingly on the verge of a rematch. President Biden enters Super Tuesday on the heels of a blistering attack in the key battleground state of Michigan regarding his handling of Israel's war on Gaza. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump appeals the recent court decision for shady real estate business practices, with the interest on the judgment mounting on a daily basis. Before we get to Super Tuesday, Michigan, Doctor, a lot of uncommitted votes for President Biden. Will that be a problem?
Well, Frank, we talk a lot on this show about psychological conflicts, okay? And again, this is an approach conflict for the president. He has to somehow be very strong on Israel, but at the same time, he has to show that he has strength for the Palestinian people. And Palestinian Americans in Dearborn, Michigan, are a significant voting bloc. So he needs to come up with a policy, a plan, an actual operational plan, if you will, to pitch to all of these people, the Jewish population and the Palestinian American population. It's a real task. It's kind of daunting, but I think he's working on it.
He's hinted at a possible ceasefire upcoming. We can only wish that happens, so some of the hostages could be released and some of the bombing could stop. But will these uncommitted stay uncommitted going into the general election in Michigan and states where it matters?
It could make a difference because they could remain angry. If the president doesn't do something, there's going to be a problem with the Palestinian American vote. And as you know, in the battleground states, you need every vote. So I think he's waiting for a ceasefire. And then I think the president is probably going to come up with some plan or operational plan that makes sense. And hopefully that's the way to go.
All right, two-part question here. Nikki Haley, for all intents and purposes, trounced in Michigan. We're going into Super Tuesday, 16 states, 1 U.S. territory. Is this the end of the line for Nikki Haley?
I think after Super Tuesday, she's probably going to drop out. She, though, has made a statement. And the statement is basically she's getting 30 to 40% of the vote. And on Super Tuesday, we're going to find out more of that. And that means that a lot of Republicans in that category may not vote for Donald J. Trump.
Well, she'll have some delegates if she drops out going into the convention.
Right.
So the question is, what does she do with those delegates? What does she get from Donald Trump?
She can do something, actually. That's a very, that's a big question.
Right.
I like that question because when you go to the convention and you have delegates, you have a platform. You may not get the nomination, of course, but those delegates allow you to say more and have more influence at the convention. And that could happen. She could affect policy at the convention.
As is Donald Trump's way, he wasn't as gracious as other candidates are when they defeat a fellow candidate. He had some not so nice things to say about Nikki Haley and the others who dropped out. Let's go a little further. Let's say things happen the way we think they're going to happen, and anything can happen. But let's say it's Donald Trump versus Joe Biden again. Who is the vice president this time around? And does he or she say, well, look what happened to the last vice president?
Yeah. Well, we have a number of choices, okay? And I think Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, is at the top of my list.
Well, what does she bring to the table? It's a small state. He's going to win it anyway.
She brings someone who's going to be very dynamically involved in supporting Donald Trump, someone who's going to be very loyal. Now, I think there might be a better candidate in terms of that feature.
I know who you're going to say because we've had this discussion
I'm
before.
I'm going to say it's Lake out in
Kari Lake.
Kari Lake out in Arizona. However, she has never been elected. So I think that's going to probably push her back.
Listen, in my career, I've been around news anchors a lot, okay? They're very smart, intelligent people. But, you know, if you don't hold an office, you really don't know how government works inside.
Yeah.
So she might not be the best pick.
She may not be the best pick because it will generate a lot of backlash because Kari Lake has never been elected to anything. So that's a problem.
And the question is, she didn't win her own state, so
Yes.
could she win in her own state? All right, time now for one of our regular segments, a commentary from Dr. Bart Rossi that we call the Rossi Rant.
And Frank, today I'd like to really go off on Alabama Supreme Court. Now, they've decided in a unanimous vote that embryos are children. And that means that these children, quote unquote, have constitutional rights. And so it leads me to think about this decision and what it means. Because in Alabama, there are a lot of poor people, there are a lot of young kids with disability who need health care. There are adults who need health care. There are veterans from Afghanistan, Iraq, who are disabled, and they need help with their health care. But Alabama does not have Medicaid expansion. Billions of dollars could come into the state, but they're not so interested in the people who are alive and need help. But embryos are now determined to be children. It just seems to be so backwards in the thinking that I'm wondering where this is going. I mean, where does it all go? Is the next step that the Supreme Court there will see that birth control should be denied? Is that the next step? So I think it's rather bizarre, and I'll probably end on that. Bizarre.
It is a perplexing issue.
Yes.
Most undoubtedly. Okay. All right. Thank you, Doctor. Coming up, a jump in the cases of measles in Florida as the state's top doctor deals with calls for his removal when Power and Politics continues. Welcome back to Power and Politics. I'm Frank Cipolla, joined by political psychologist Dr. Bart Rossi. An outbreak of measles in Florida has parents concerned as the state's Surgeon General ignores federal recommendations by first failing to urge parents to vaccinate their children and then letting parents decide if their unvaccinated children should go to school even after they have been exposed to someone with the virus. So my question to you, Doctor, you're the psychologist. What is it about vaccinations that people have a problem with?
Well, Frank, science is the truth. Science we should believe in. Is it perfect all the time? No. But a lot of people don't like the government intruding on them, and somehow they've conflated this whole thing about vaccination and the government in a rather strange way, so that their kids don't get a vaccination, which will help prevent a disease.
No, it's odd. When we were growing up, you just got the vaccination, you went to school, and that was the end of it.
You need to get vaccinated. You need to get vaccinated, and this bizarre, this thinking is strange. I understand you can criticize, vaccination. You can do a lot of criticism all over, but in this case, science does work. And measles, mumps, smallpox, polio. I mean, these vaccines have eliminated major diseases.
Okay, we should mention that, for people, measles is sort of an afterthought now, but it is a dangerous disease.
Yeah.
It causes brain damage, lung infection, pneumonia in some cases, and in some cases death as well. So let's go back and maybe we can dig a little deeper here. If science says this is a vaccine that works, and it works overwhelmingly in children.
Correct.
Why would you run the risk of sending your child to school or be exposed to other kids that might have measles when your child is unvaccinated? What's the psychology of the parent is what I'm asking.
Good question, because I always go back to what a person's references, their own personality, their own thought process. And we all have a certain thought process that we go back to. And in this case, I think parents are overwhelmed in these cases with the idea that government is intruding on them. So their point of reference in their own mind is such that it overwhelms logical thinking, because it should be logical to have your kid vaccinated. But the thinking overwhelms the logic here.
which is kind of hard to understand because it is logic.
It is hard, but logic sometimes is not in style.
As you say, it's not in style.
Sometimes we say that, yes.
All right, Florida Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz has called for the removal of the state Surgeon General, who has also, if you remember, discouraged COVID vaccinations.
Yes.
Your thoughts on that? Should he be removed?
I think he should be certainly censured or criticized. I mean, what would happen if people listened to him and more kids do not get vaccinated? Will that bring back the disease?
This might fall into commentary, but it seems to me at least that politics has entered the realm of science.
Yes.
And once they merge, it's really difficult to think, as you mentioned a moment ago, logically. You're the psychologist.
Well, certain biases, certain personalities override logic and sensibility. And we're seeing that when it comes to vaccination. We're seeing that logic does not prevail, and sometimes this perverted thinking is predominant with some people.
And as I mentioned, it is a dangerous disease. It's an afterthought for many people, but it is a dangerous disease. Now, we have an update to a story we discussed recently about a bill placing chaplains in Florida schools so they can act as school counselors. The Florida House has approved that bill. It now heads to the Florida Senate. Dr. Rossi, are you surprised at the bill's progress? I know you've been an outspoken critic about this as well.
Yes, I'm surprised that it's getting the traction. And because, as we've said here before, is this Sunday school in the public schools? Who determines where these chaplains are coming from? Are we talking about Muslim chaplains? Are we talking about white Christian national counselors for the kids? What about counselors that are affiliated with Black Lives Matter? Or what about Catholic nuns and priests? Should they come into the school and also provide counseling? It just doesn't make any sense to me. It is the opposite of the separation of church and state.
Well, if chaplains are coming into the school and you're a religious person, why wouldn't you say, if your son or daughter has a problem, let's go see the priest at the church so you can talk with him privately? Why must the priest be in the school? If you feel as though your son or daughter needs that care or that discussion, why not bring them to your local church or synagogue, wherever the case may be?
I would even go a step further or be out in front on this. Why don't we have some very good licensed counselors in the school, licensed psychologists who put in some time at the school?
And some schools do, in all fairness.
Oh yeah, and licensed social workers who know about cognitive behavioral counseling to help kids think differently, to handle their problems. People who are professionals at this. Bringing in religious people, it just seems to be going down the wrong road, to say the least.
Do you think the governor will sign this, or does he have the same reservations as maybe you do?
Well, I didn't think it was going to get traction. So here we are.
It's passed the House, and it's in the Senate.
And maybe the governor will go along with this, and it's going to tell us a little bit more about him too.
All right. All right, thank you, Doctor. We're going to take a break. When we come back, the always popular sunshine or showers segment, when we see who enjoyed the sunshiny day this week and who in the news got caught without an umbrella, when Power and Politics continues. Welcome back to Power and Politics. As you know, the weather can change in a moment in Florida, so every week we span the state to find out who enjoyed the warm rays of sunshine and who got caught in the rain. It's time for the always popular segment, Sunshine or Showers. Doctor, we start with you. Who is in the sunshine this week?
Well, Frank, the School for Advanced Studies, okay, is a high school in Miami-Dade County, all right? And it's #1 in the state of Florida for education. Their educational program is far and away #1, and it's 3rd in the nation in terms of overall high school educational endeavors, okay? And I think they deserve to be in the sunshine, and I really commend the principal, the teachers there, the staff. They work very hard to achieve this kind of a level of support around the state and around the country. It's hard to be #1 in this category or #3 in the nation. So they're in the sunshine.
They're in the sunshine this week. Okay. You want to ask me?
Please.
All right. In the sunshine this week, I don't know if you saw this or not, the Naples. Have you been to Naples, Florida? They have a wonderful pier. It juts out about 1,100 feet.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it was damaged. It was built in 1888. It got damaged by storms in 1910, 1926, 1944, 1960, and most recently with Hurricane Irma in 2017 and Hurricane Ian just in 2022. The Naples City Council in the sunshine this week because they're going to spend $22.5 million to fix it, hopefully once and for all. It's going to have more shady areas. Right. If you've been on that pier, it's a tourist attraction. If you've been on that pier, it can be sunny and hot. Sometimes there'll be more shaded areas. It'll have more wonderful views of the Gulf of Mexico. So they're spending the money. They've designed it a bit differently. It will be a tourist attraction again. If you haven't, you need to go down to Naples, Florida and check it out.
Well, Frank, good project. And who do you have now in the showers?
Very well done.
All right.
Just like we rehearsed it. Hey, you know, when you run for president and you lose, you basically have three options. Mm-hmm. You go back to your state and do the best job you can as governor or senator, okay? You endorse the winner and you say, hey, I'm going to do everything to make sure you win and then hope he loses by one vote so you can run again 4 years later. Or you say some very nice things about the winner in the hopes that, you know, maybe you're the vice presidential nominee. Governor DeSantis, the good governor from the great state of Florida, he is in the showers, and I'll tell you why. He's an educated man. There's no doubt about it. Yale, Harvard, educated guy. But he must have missed the Politics 101 class at some point, because what he's been doing is bad-mouthing Donald Trump and alienating his future supporters should DeSantis run again, and also, killing his chances of being the vice presidential nominee. Maybe he doesn't care, I don't know. But yet Governor DeSantis just hasn't learned the lesson of basic politics, which is you graciously step aside, you endorse the candidate, and you hope that maybe you become the vice presidential nominee, or that you have those same supporters when you run again in 4 years. Ron DeSantis, the governor of the great state of Florida, in the showers.
And we've talked about his personality before. It's kind of like my way or the highway.
Yes.
And that's pretty much what he's saying right now.
Again, an example of him coming back and not exactly changing, but being the same Ron DeSantis. Right. Okay, it's time for you in the show. Who's in the showers this week?
I have to go back to the Alabama Supreme Court. Their ruling is so strange. And
with regard to IVF?
Yes, with regard to actually determining that embryos are children and that they have constitutional rights. So that brings in the whole big Megillah, if you will.
Is that an official word?
That's a psychological term. On what to do with this whole ruling. And I think it's so strange, really.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. Okay, it's time for a break. When we return, a commentary by yours truly titled, Let's Be Frank, When Power and Politics Continues. Welcome back to Power and Politics. Those of a certain age remember a time when we welcomed immigrants. They were our neighbors. It wasn't always a smooth process, but in time we not only learned to live together, but associate with each other, to enjoy each other's culture and heritage. How many of you watching right now are married to or living with partners who are of different ethnicities or religions? That's the American experiment at work. I know it sounds like a cliche, but there's a reason why we're the greatest country in the world. We're a mix of all races, colors, and creeds, which add up to the melting pot that is America. I wonder why, then, we can't seem to find a way to manage our current immigration problems. Just last month, there was wide-ranging support in Washington for an immigration reform bill that had been hammered out over several months by representatives from both parties. Instrumental in building the original World Trade Center towers in New York City. He told me as they dug the foundation, they found a weathered piece of paper from a much earlier project listing what each worker would be paid based on their ethnicity. Those of my ethnicity were near the bottom of the list. Discrimination then, and sadly now, even in the 21st century. Those in Washington who first reached an immigration deal and then backed out because they saw more opportunity in not solving the problem should be ashamed of themselves. All of us should be ashamed. We'll be right back. That's it for this week's edition of Power and Politics. On behalf of my co-host, political psychologist Dr. Bart Rossi, thanks for joining us. As always, we'd like to know what you think. Visit us at powerandpolitics.tv or email us at info@powerandpolitics.tv. We'll see you again a week from now at this time and on this same station. Have a great week.